which is hi, sorry, hi, welcome to the Jib. This podcast is about the many and varied schemes of the many and varied U.S. law enforcement and intelligence agencies, organizations, and committees, and how they are stupid and funny. Join us in our merry journey through space and time. Hi, I'm Barry. You might know me as that guy everyone is always telling you not to be.
Hello, everybody, and I'm Seamus. You may know me from the documentary film Potassium, Nature's Other Lube.
Ask your doctor before. Okay. So.
Yeah. Oh, and then there's Chesh.
Hi, I'm Chesh. I'm the guest today, and I actually invented the CIA as just a way to fuck with people.
That is true. Yeah, I've looked up the documents, and the name Chesh keeps popping up.
We should have started with her on episode 1. I mean,
you really should have. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, how far into this thing? Maybe we can make this episode 1. We just.
Yeah, just reboot. I'm out.
I got a tattoo of that.
Okay. Chesh made the mistake of being interested in some of my weird American foreign policy rants. So I said maybe she might like to join us on one of our shows, and that's how this happened.
Yeah, he also told me that it's apparently a serious podcast and made the mistake of inviting me along. Yeah. So this is gonna be a ride. I had Barry on one of my shows that covers like current events, and watching him go off about like European politics for about a half an hour was great.
Sorry. Yeah,
but you know what? Before we start, though, I mean, I'm sure we have an ad at some point, but you should probably plug your show.
Me?
Who are you from? The people that don't know out there in the web universe of
internet
thingies. Yeah. Where are you from?
I'm Chesh. You can find me on YouTube or on Twitch. On Twitch, I'm likely doing art stuff, and you can find me at Goblin Q Cheshire. However, if you find me on YouTube, you can just find me as Chesh. And I do a variety show, so sometimes I'm talking about current events. I have a show called Dumb Feck Friday, where we have a giggle at some dumb things that we find, and I don't know what I'm going to do when Twitter goes under, because that's where I get all of my content for that. And then on Tuesdays, it's mostly just me hanging out on Tuesdays, talking about whatever thing I happen to have found interesting recently.
Say professionalism, Barry. That's how it's done.
That's it. I wouldn't be thinking about that. I just say
it's okay. I've been doing this longer than Barry has.
Dumb Feck Friday. Yeah.
Hey, that opening is great.
Oh, hell yeah.
What's everybody drinking today?
Where did you get Feck from?
Guinness.
Nice.
Where did you get Feck from on Dumb Feck Friday?
It was just not to say fuck, because I'm
you know it's an Irish thing.
By the internet. Is it?
Yeah. We say feck as in feck off, and you big fecker.
Oh, so yeah, it's exactly the same. Used in the exact same way.
You never saw Father Ted?
A little bit different in the Irish, but that's okay.
You gotta watch Father Ted.
Oh, I'm missing out.
Yeah. Oh, what's this?
Club Zero.
Oh, rock shandy, zero sugar.
Is that the ad for today?
Yeah.
No.
I got tea, but I also got.
We don't have ads in this podcast, Chesh. I don't know why. There's certainly no ad in this.
Have you ever had this?
No. What is it?
This is Sleeman. It's a brewery that's near me. That's like a Canadian brewery. It's got a beaver and a maple leaf as their logo.
Sounds pornographic.
Sleeman sounds like the bad guy in some movie.
I did get you some of this. It's a light beer though. It's not even an amber, but they do have an amber version. This is just the original.
I'll definitely check it out.
This is the first in a series of sub-series of podcasts within the Jib about CIA-arranged coups. A lot of these will sound very similar, like each other, because the CIA has a specific method that they deployed all over the world, but mostly in Central and South America, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East, surely the best of the Easts. Right, here is the pattern they use. After a period of instability, where a country's resources were being stolen by international corporations, they finally managed to nail together a democratically elected government. That new government passes legislation, or looks like it might, to reallocate income from the country's resources to its own people. The CIA moves in, finds some disaffected group, often in the army, funds and trains them, topples the government, puts a fascist dictator in control who opens the country's resources back up to international corporations. And after about 25 years, the entire project collapses and they have to start all over again or do something else. And when I say fascist dictator, I mean someone who rules with a police state tortures, illegal detentions, extrajudicial killings, etc., flaunting wealth while the rest of the country is racked by poverty, an atmosphere of public suspicion and paranoia, smashing any attempt at worker organization, meaning unions, a pathological hatred for the left, intellectualism generally. So it's not just me saying the word fascist for stuff I don't like.
Well, they usually ban unions and ban opposing political parties.
Correct. But not just ban unions, but they would move in with the army and smash them with guns.
Right. Not shoot them, like just actually gun butt. Just
yeah, bam, we're going to waste bullets on these communists. In Argentina, the union leaders just started disappearing.
I'm shocked.
That'll work.
So we assume they were killed, but they just disappeared. So it's not just me saying the word fascist for stuff I don't like, which is something I get accused of all the time by all sorts of people on Twitter. Well, you just say fascist for stuff you don't like.
People on Twitter don't know what the word fascist means.
Yeah, it means you have no idea what it means. This is like literally fascism. And the CIA keeps putting these people in charge of countries. Over and over again, you'll see the same thing, right?
He says literally, when literally is also used a lot of the time to mean facetiously.
Right.
I mean literally.
I know what you mean, but you're talking to people on Twitter.
Okay.
And so they don't literally know what fascism is. They literally don't know.
Literally don't know.
You're telling them who they also are using the word literally to mean facetiously. You just don't speak the language, Barry.
Facetiously, of course, is one of the two words in the English language that has all the vowels once and only once and in the correct order. Now, I've started this. The title of this podcast, I'm going to hope, is PBSuccess, which is about the operation, right? And the reason I'm starting this about the coup in Guatemala in 1954 is our topic, right?
What's the date that you're starting at?
You what?
The date?
In 1954.
So you're starting in 54. You're not going to talk about like the.
Oh no, they're going to talk about the whole thing.
No, okay, but when you said we're starting with PBSuccess,
this episode. We're starting this episode with called PBSuccess.
Oh, okay, sorry, I misunderstood.
The reason we're starting with PBSuccess instead of the more obvious Operation Ajax, which is everybody's favorite CIA coup, the one in Iran, because there's a common misconception of American foreign policy interference that it's always about the oil, right? You'll see that even in sensible reporters and so on. Oh, it's about the oil, right? But that's never the central concern. The central concern is always about control of the markets. Control.
Right.
It doesn't matter what the market is. In this case, it's about bananas. Right? Hey, there she is. Guatemala was one of the original banana republics. Now, here we go. Guatemala is a small country in Central America between Mexico and Honduras. It achieved independence from Spain and Mexico in 1821, which I guess is the answer to your original question there, Chesh. 1821. It achieved independence from Spain and Mexico in 1821. For the rest of that century, it was subject to all sorts of political instability as different actors, mainly the Americans, tried to take advantage of its resources. By 1900, the United Fruit Company, UFC, owned the entire banana industry in Guatemala. They were the largest exporter of bananas in the world. For most of the first half of the 20th century, it was run by the country was run by various fascist dictators working with the UFC and the United States government. Anytime a dictator was challenged by democracy, American forces would move in to make sure that democracy didn't take hold. There's at least one case from 1920 when the American army landed troops on Guatemalan soil for this purpose. Now, one of these dictators was Jorge Ubico. That's him.
Hey, Jorge.
Hey, Jorge. ¿Cómo estás? Under Ubico, hundreds of thousands of acres of public land were transferred to the UFC. But is the UFC also like some kind of fighting organization?
Yeah.
Every time I said this, I felt like I was talking to mixed martial arts thing, but the UFC is just the fruit company.
Yeah, it's a big Joe Rogan thing. So, hey, we're going to have a lot of crossover in this episode, right?
Oh,
from Joe Rogan people and people interested in
yeah.
CIA.
That's our main audience.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Hundreds of thousands of acres of public land were transferred to the UFC. By 1930, the UFC was the largest landowner and the largest employer in Guatemala. It owned all the telephones and all the railroads and operated the only proper port in the country. So this private company basically owned the entire infrastructure of Guatemala as a private thing, which is classic.
The UFC, before it became the UFC, was a merger of a handful of different companies. So that basically it was a merger of companies to create a monopoly, not just in Guatemala, but as well as in America.
It is a fascist dream.
Monopoly.
having total control over all the land and the people.
Well, United Fruits, what United Fruits did is they created a vertical monopoly. So they did. It's the same thing that Ticketmaster does right now.
Yes,
right? They control the top to bottom the entire process. They owned the railways. They owned the property. They owned the working class situation. They owned the radio. They owned so many things top to bottom in the industry that they were in, that there was not only was there no competition, but they could do whatever the fuck they wanted.
Yeah, it's kind of like a larger scale of like what the Pullmans and those kinds of folks did at the turn of the century, right? Where you would have like, company towns, right? So you got paid on company stock, and you could only buy at the company store.
Oh, you mean like Walmart trying to pay people with Walmart gift cards?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, this was a company country.
Exactly.
Right. Ubiko, this gentleman, passed laws to enable forced labor of homeless people and allowed UFC to discipline its employees however it wished, up to and including execution. So
I can't wait to get taken out to the back of the Walmart parking lot and get shot because I didn't treat a Karen properly.
Well, the thing was, vagrancy was a crime, and it was sentenced to 100 days of forced labor for UFC. So that's the perfect marriage of state and corporate power, the fascist dream, right?
Well, back up. What was a crime for that?
Vagrancy, if you're homeless.
Jesus Christ.
Not the worst thing they did, but pretty bad, right?
Yeah.
I like the idea of a corporation being able to punish you for being homeless is such a dystopian nightmare that it's like, what the hell are you talking about? But if Walmart owns the city, right, then they do what they want.
Like there's movies about that, and the movies are recognized as science fiction,
Right.
This was going on in Guatemala City. What else? Oh yeah, the UFC paid no taxes.
Of course they didn't.
Which again is the fascist dream. Zero tax is the fascist dream.
And I agree with switching the language a lot, because calling it capitalism, I think, does capitalism a disservice, and it doesn't, and it allows these fascist groups to hide themselves in capitalism.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you don't like capitalism, you're a communist, or you're a socialist, which is basically a communist, even though none of those things are true, because they want to water down the language so they don't actually have to take responsibility or be caught doing what they're actually doing, which is fascism, which is what you currently see now.
In an article once, I said fascism is weaponized capitalism.
I mean, yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that.
Yeah.
Capitalism done wrong.
Say again, Chesh?
Capitalism done wrong.
Oh yeah, capitalism done wrong and weaponized. UFC paid no taxes. Ubiko answered several inevitable peasant uprisings with internment and massacres, all supported by the United States, acting under pressure from UFC executives. These UFC executives had many ties to the Eisenhower administration, including to Allen Dulles, the director of the CIA, and to his brother John Foster Dulles, who was the Secretary of State.
So can we talk about how big of a conflict of interest it is to have two brothers in these two positions?
Yes.
No conflicts at all. Oh, wait a minute.
No, everything's fine. Yeah, we checked with the ethics committee oversight. It's fine.
This just in. We have an ad. We do have an ad.
We do have an ad.
Yeah. Okay. It's time for. We have a sponsor announcement. Okay.
There's no. Are you sure?
Yep. Yeah. Again,
Okay.
they always want it in the middle of the show for some reason. I don't know why.
Okay.
They said somebody signed a contract to do that.
Well, no,
I didn't do that. Did you do that?
That's a memorandum of agreement and not a contract.
But I didn't do that. Did you do that?
It's not about me. Why don't you just tell us what's he got there?
All right. This week's our sponsor is Global Media Enterprises, who have produced an amazing pinup calendar called Chiquita Girls. Miss October is dynamite, and I mean literally. She dresses as a stick of dynamite with the URSS stamped on it. That's Spanish for USSR, by the way. These girls sure delight and thrill in equal measure, dressed in a delightful range of attire, from locally native worn travailler in the more modern weapon grade dressed. Triptyl is the modern Guatemalan city woman. Miss March absolutely slays with her bonniello and her AK-47 strategically placed across her enticing form. Yowzer. But that's not all. Order today and get a box of bananas free. Well, not free because bananas are never free, as we've about to learn. Back to you, Barry.
Okay.
Bum.
Sorry about all that.
$10 is $10.
$10 is $10. Never say no, right? Gotta make that paper. Gotta make that bread.
That's right.
Okay. This is going to seem irrelevant after hearing about that calendar, but in 1944, when U.S. forces were busy elsewhere, a democratic revolution led by Jacobo Arbenz took. He immediately set about fixing the country with a series of social and economic reforms. Is that Arbenz?
Yep.
I've never seen him before. I've seen the other guy, but I've never seen him before.
Yep.
This man is an absolute Chad.
Okay, Arbenz, that's better than anything I've here. So this is
I thought his name was Jacob. Sorry, never mind. Moving on.
Yeah, a series of social.
That is his middle name.
His middle name.
Chad's his middle name.
Okay, Jacobo Chad Arbenz. He immediately set about fixing the country with a series of social and economic reforms. The main plank of this was a land redistribution program to enfranchise campesinos. Campesinos being landless peasants. Nevertheless, by 1950, the UFC profits were twice as large as the revenue of the entire Guatemalan government, which is funny just as on its own. And it wasn't enough, obviously. So
jokes on them. The UFC was the government.
Well, effectively, yeah. But then Arbenz took over, and that wasn't true anymore.
You mean by took over was democratically elected?
Yeah. Well,
Well, Putin was democratically elected.
No, this guy we're looking at, 168%. The guy we're looking at right now, 168% of the vote.
Well, there you go.
This guy was actually democratically elected. That's one of the things that makes this whole situation so ironic. Is that America went busting in there, being like, "We're bringing democracy," but the guy that they're ousting was voted in a democratic process. And one of the main policies that he changed was made a bunch of landowners, which then allowed 80,000 people able to vote when they wouldn't have been able to before.
Yeah.
But I'm sure you'll get to that.
So Arbenz had to go because they were only making twice as much as the entire government. So Arbenz had to go, right? The prep for Operation PBSuccess was a campaign of psychological warfare. The first
wait, you can't skip why. You can't skip why the CIA showed up.
Okay, go.
Okay, so the CIA showed up. Okay, the reason why the CIA showed up is that this guy that we're looking at right now took property back from the UFC. Right, he took the property back, but he didn't just take it.
Land redistribution program, yeah.
Right, he was buying it from them, so he wasn't just stealing it from them. He bought it from them. But here was the trick: the cost, the amount that he was giving them for the land that they owned, which was about 78 some odd % of the usable land, of which they were only using 12% of.
Yeah,
he gave them the amount that they claimed that the land was worth when they were trying to scalp money off of having to pay taxes to the government.
Yes, so they undersold their own land value, yeah.
Right, they were projecting that the land that they were on was worth less and reporting that it was worth less so they could pay less on it. So when this guy was buying the land back from them, he was like, I'm going to give you the amount that you said your land was worth. And they got mad. And what did they do? They cried to the American government and were like, mommy, American government, the mean man is giving us money that we said our land was worth when we were trying to rip them off.
This is also another thing that's very common in these stories, in these coup stories, is that when the democratically elected government takes over, they use what the other guys had been doing, what the fascists had been doing against them.
Yeah.
And this is what Arbenz did. And that's happened in Iran as well, actually.
So basically the UFC, the company that was already making ridiculous amounts of profits, went to the US government and was like, help us. And they went, okay, because guess what? The two people worked for this company back in the day when these guys, when they were lawyers for this company that assisted them in the buying of the property in Guatemala.
And those two guys are not the only people in the Eisenhower administration to have ties to the UFC.
Oh, correct. It was a huge company at the time. I mean, it's still large. And on top of that, there's this whole other little bit, and this is the thing that makes it absolutely hilarious, is they hired a very good PR person, and that's why they were able to succeed. And this is what I mean whenever I talk about on my own channel about whether you can use PR for good or for evil, because perception was everything. Perception was everything. They went on a huge campaign in America to convince the American people that Guatemala, who had a democratically elected government in charge, were communists because they didn't want to be run by corporate.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's not just that, but they also ran exactly that. They also ran that kind of campaign inside Guatemala.
Yes.
Mm.
Exactly. Sorry, please continue. I just couldn't skip the fact about the whole reason why these people were here was because a business needed to cry to the government to use the government tax dollars paid for by the American people to support what ended up being basically a genocide and a 40-year civil war, which was backed, by the way, by the American government and the CIA.
Organized, more or less organized by the CIA, yeah. Starting to rethink my condensed podcast script strategy.
I mean, you made the mistake of inviting me here.
No, it's great. Please keep interrupting me because this is all good stuff and provides interesting context. So stop me whenever you want, right?
There's just, it's so much. And like the reason this happened was because like a decade before there was a merger that went on for United Foods. And so when United Foods merged together, it got too big. And so when it got too big, it had too much political weight that it could throw around in lobbying. And that's what they did. It's not like they just, as much as I'm joking that they just went and cried to the government and the government went, okay. No, it took them a lot of pressure to do so. And a lot of additional propaganda that was thrown around on the government, on the floor of the American government, right? And so like, and I say this not because like it does matter to this story, but it matters now. That shit is happening now.
Yes,
currently happening in America right now, and it's not just happening in America against foreign people from America. It's happening to Americans right the fuck now.
Well, the hope of all these podcasts that we're doing, the hope is that people listening to it would understand that they can apply all this. This is not just dry facts. This is stuff that the American government has done and continues to do.
And will do to its own people because corporate is more important to them.
And it's not just the American government, of course. There's lots of governments doing lots of shady business. Like France is up to shady business in the Sahel. And England is always up to shady business. But this particular podcast is about American foreign policy.
Yeah.
The prep for Operation PBSuccess was a campaign of psychological warfare. The first attempt to get rid of Arbenz was Operation PB Fortune, authorized by Harry Truman, but it was a complete failure. The second one was also a failure, but the third one was a PBSuccess, mostly because of the groundwork. Although Arbenz had the support of the tiny Communist Party in his coalition, there were communists in Guatemala, but it was a tiny Communist Party, and he had their supported for basically what was a rainbow coalition. No Communist Party members ever held any cabinet position. The CIA engaged in a comprehensive campaign of propaganda, black ops, false flag operations that were designed to make it appear as though the government was being threatened by Guatemalan communists who were obviously being controlled by Soviet Russia. For an example, the CIA planted boxes of weapons marked with hammers and sickles to be discovered. For another example, the CIA convinced Cardinal Spellman, the Roman Catholic Archbishop of New York, to write a letter to the devout Catholics of Guatemala, urging them to rise up against Arbenz.
Yeah, so they weaponized. So they weaponized Russia, who had nothing to do with this, by the way. They went and looked. Russia had nothing. The Soviets had nothing to do with any of this situation. And on top of it, where did they go? They went to the church. They went to pastors and convinced them to add politically charged rhetoric to their pastoral sermons.
This guy Cardinal Spellman.
What do we see right now?
This guy Cardinal Spellman was part of a cabal of Catholics, Roman Catholics in New York, who were basically doing all they could to get political power. He's also active in a number of other podcasts, which I think we'll be doing in the future. He had something to do about Vietnam as well. Vietnam, a lot of people don't realize, was a Roman Catholic operation.
But what do you see in America going on right now? you see politically charged sermons in churches. And part of that, and it's one of those things where it's like, is this the CIA doing this, or is this CIA tactics from another country that's trying to screw with American?
Well, the Guatemalans, the good Catholics of Guatemala, had to listen to various lectures from their priests.
I hope it's Guatemala. I hope Guatemala is like just messing with America and doing the exact same thing that America did to them. That would be just like.
On the ground, the CIA worked with a Guatemalan general called Castillo Armas, whom no one liked. Not even the conservative wing of the Guatemalan armed forces, who would usually be the natural allies of these people. The CIA pumped Armas and the tiny number of people who followed him with resources and weapons and training while they were pumping bullshit into the media. And I think it said Armas had something like the entire rebel force controlled by Armas was about 300 people, from what I remember.
So the basically there's a whole ton of propaganda went out that was like, well, Guatemalan doesn't want to fight the American army. The American army is so strong, and then and then they did exactly the same kind of thing that Russia's currently doing with Ukraine. But I mean, that probably would have been the outcome had the propaganda not worked. That like the American army would have failed miserably in Guatemala. They did not have the resources nor the number of people.
Well, it wasn't just propaganda. There was all sorts of weird operations. Like one thing they did was the CIA dropped a load of bombs on Honduras.
Yep.
Armas himself received $3,000 a month, which even now would sort out a lot of my problems. And that's that's in 1954 dollars. So
yeah.
Arbenz' friends. Where's Arbenz?
Huh?
Where's Arbenz? Give me back Arbenz.
Sorry.
There he is.
There you go.
Arbenz' friends.
Our Chad of the hour.
Chad and some local communists, including the young Chad Guevara.
Chad Guevara, careful now.
Sorry. Not to all. They're all Chads. Begged him not to, but he resigned in 1954 and handed over power to Colonel Diaz, who was the head of the army. Diaz assured Arbenz that the Americans told him if he took over, Armas would get nowhere near the presidency because everybody hated Castillo Armas, right? Soon afterwards, the CIA had a conversation with Diaz and told him he was, and this is the quote, right? This is the actual quote, just not convenient for the requirements of American foreign policy.
Yeah, and this guy stepped down. Basically, his reason for stepping down was that he was trying to protect both the Guatemalan people, but also because he wanted to try to keep intact whatever he was actually able to put forward while he was still there. Like, he didn't do it to like save his own skin, and he didn't do it because he was like a pussy. He like did everything that he possibly could. It's just the CSI had way more resources and way more capability than he had at the time to actually be, because conveniently, weirdly enough, the radio station that he had access to happened to go down for a couple weeks right at the exact time that the CIA was broadcasting from Florida, pretending they were in Guatemala. Funny thing of that. This poor man. If this poor man had hired me, he would have been fine.
He did everything he could. No, Arbenz did everything he could.
Yeah.
He did. He went to the UN. He did everything he could.
Yeah, and what happened at the UN? Oh, Britain and France both said, hey, we need to do an investigation into this, and America vetoed it. And it was the first time a veto like that had ever been used against allies. Dicks, because they knew. Fuckers.
A lot of convenient things happened, huh?
So Diaz was told that he was just not convenient for the requirements of American foreign policy, which presumably means he had a respect for democracy and human rights. Diaz was stunned and asked for confirmation from a higher CIA source. The higher CIA source was John Purifroy, who was personally appointed as an ambassador to Guatemala by Eisenhower, and the man who was known in some parts of the world as the Butcher of Greece, for reasons which we mixed over in a future podcast. Purifroy not only confirmed the CIA position. Sorry, this is just. But handed Diaz a list of names of Guatemalans who were to be shot immediately. And Diaz asked why they had to be shot, and Purifroy said, and here's the quote, because they're communists. Now, you're not usually supposed to say the quiet part out loud.
Yeah.
But what the CIA are telling people here is, you could only be we will allow you to be in charge of this country only if you kill communists.
So I guess that better off dead than red is a little bit more serious than other things.
But they don't have to demonstrate in what way they're communist, right? They just have to say that they are and then convince people that they are, right?
Well, yes, but in a way, like there was a Guatemalan Communist Party. And all those people would have been registered communists. So I guess, I mean, I don't know if any of those were on the list, but I doubt it because none of those had any power. They probably just meant union leaders and or worker organization people. They probably meant communists by that.
Right. So, like, it's the same as, like, defining fascism. Like, just calling something you don't like fascism or just calling something you don't like or want to get people against a Nazi or a communist. It's like, well, all you have to do is define your terms. And realistically, I just think people need to get better at calling out defining terms.
Well, I mean, there's a sense in which, to these people, anybody who opposes fascism would be communist.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they're communists. Diaz refused. Armas became president on the 7th of July, 1954. And then you see, I don't know, I like doing this concise thing where I just put two things together and you can write your own little story for the two sentences. Diaz refused. Armas became president on the 7th of July, 1954. Elections were held in October. All political parties were banned from the election, and Armas was the only candidate on the ballot. He won with
over 99% of the vote.
He did.
Unlike his predecessor, who won 68% of a legitimate vote in a legitimate election. The people that America, coming for democracy, to bring democracy to Guatemala, got rid of.
There was a famous election that Saddam Hussein did in Iraq. Saddam Hussein was another American guy put in charge of our country. Yeah, Saddam Hussein was actually on the CIA payroll. Apparently, he won an election once with 101% of the vote.
Surely you're going to cover this one in another.
Iraq?
Yeah.
Sure, yeah. No problem.
You have to.
12-part episode.
No, it'll be one episode, and we'll invite Chesh, and Chesh will fill in all the gaps. So this guy won. Armas won. Immediately after the coup came Operation PB History, which was a massive CIA attempt to scan any and all government documents from the time of Arbenz for evidence that elements of his government were operating under Soviet control, as this is something Chesh mentioned earlier. And straight after the coup was called Operation PB History. This would have justified the coup, or at least justified it in a way that the CIA felt that they might be able to defend. Many CIA agents studied 500,000 documents and found no evidence of any connection to Soviet Russia whatsoever.
And it's almost like they destroyed a lot of the evidence of any interaction during this.
They destroyed the country and then destroyed all evidence of having destroyed it.
You're right.
However, an offshoot of Operation PB History, Operation Coup Fire, that's what it's called, resulted in the opening of a file on Che Guevara, which would become the biggest file the CIA would ever have on a single individual.
Wow.
I don't know why I said single individual, because individuals would be single. That's tautology, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like saying verbally speaking.
Yes, which would become the biggest file the CIA would ever have on an individual. What followed Operation PB History was a carousel of coups, rigged elections, US-supported dictators, left-wing uprisings, massacres, and at least one genocide. This whole adventure is called the Guatemalan Civil War and lasted from 1960 to 1996, which is longer than these things usually last. Usually they're about 25 years, the mess after a CIA coup. According to the UN Commission for Historical Clarification, which was the Truth and Reconciliation body involved in putting together the Guatemalan government after the Civil War. According to the UN Commission for the Historical Clarification, government forces and state-sponsored CIA-trained paramilitaries were responsible for over 93% of human rights violations during the war. Both sides, though, yeah? Both sides? Yeah?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, anytime somebody says both sides to you, just run. Something's wrong somewhere. These days, in common with most of Latin America, Guatemala has calmed down a lot, and the main problems are rampant corruption and crime, which is a big improvement. It's not good, but it's a big improvement. United Fruit Company is still in the banana business, but now they are called Chiquita.
Yay!
That's the pop line. That is the punchline.
Yay!
Surprise to everybody who's been listening so far.
Nice.
Awesome.
But now
bananas. We're literally in a situation where the American people went out of their way to cause, and like I've seen most of the way people talk about this remove the American people kind of from the situation because they were essentially lied to and their money was moved. But the thing is like, who's in charge of keeping their government and their media in check? The people. How much can you use ignorance as an excuse? Now, to be fair, they didn't have access to the internet at the time. They didn't have access to a lot of information. There's only so much they could have done.
I don't know if I blame the people. I would blame, because I think that's basically the job of journalism.
Yes. Yeah.
And
100%.
And there are reports of like mainstream publications like New York Times and Life magazine pushing this CIA bullshit about Guatemala at the time.
You mean that? Wait a minute. You're saying that the New York Times was wrong?
Not only were they wrong, not only was the New York Times wrong, but their handling of the situation was so that the only person who picked up on the lying was the only person who did any work. And the person who did and put this out was a Mexican journalist who was then, when people who happened to, go to college together, the brothers and the guy at the New York Times got together for lunch and decided that this guy was a threat to the safety of them helping Guatemala. Who'd have thought?
It's all about who you know, isn't it? It's about who you know in these CIA coups. It's all about who you know.
Everything about who you know. And the thing is, I think people don't realize like how small of a world we live in when you start getting into like the upper echelons of like who has money and who runs what. Yeah. Right?
They all know each other.
They all know each other and they're all helping each other out and they're all just sitting there just jerking each other off and being like, we already have enough money. We don't need to make more money. What we need to do is control the money and monopolize it so that way nothing like our situation doesn't get disturbed in any way, shape, or form. And like that's what it's about.
The other thing is this is a perfect example of what the CIA, which was really about, was protecting American interests. And that's a verbiage that was brought on by Theodore Roosevelt, right? Because that's what justified a lot of the justified a lot of the interventions. There's only one thing that
Theodore Roosevelt did that I appreciate, and it was the rules around mergers.
Yeah.
Because he was like the trust fund buster. And so that was great. But guess what? As soon as he was gone, look what happened with Chiquita. It was a merger. The whole thing that started this was a merger. It gave a company too much power of an area, including like an up and down, like a vertical monopoly. And in doing so, when that monopoly was threatened, they fucking caused a 40-year civil war after overthrowing not a dictatorship, a democracy that was for the people and by the people.
Yeah, that's the way it goes in these coups. It's always a democracy they overthrow. It happens all the time.
And it is so fucked up. It is so fucked up.
And there's going to be lots and lots of these in this subcategory of Jib podcasts. You're going to see a lot of this, and it's honestly it's hard to believe sometimes. It's hard to believe.
I don't doubt it. I just there's something special about like that there are actual conspiracies out there that matter that people could be talking about that exist because there is nothing about this that is not conspiracy. This is purposeful. It was meditated. Everything about this was a conspiracy. They lied to the American people, et cetera, et cetera. They fabricated evidence. They destroyed evidence. All of this is the government fucking conspiring to help not just American interests, because it's not the people's interest. Americans aren't interested in this. That wasn't them. They didn't decide this. If they did, you wouldn't have to lie to them about it. This is corporate. This is America. This is extremist capitalism into fascism, right? Yeah. And so when you have that, you get into this situation where you have nothing but conspiracy. That's all it is. Yeah. And utilizing the CIA, right? And so why do people give two shits about flat Earth or give two shits about evolution is a conspiracy? Like, guys, there's actually like fun conspiracies that exist that you can actually affect and do things about.
People aren't talking about it, you know.
Care about
this. But Seamus, what's happening this week?
Oh, you mean what's new?
What's new? Yeah. I have to remember one phrase I always screw it up. What's new? Just what's, and I said I have a trick for remembering it. It's what new, pussycat, right? And
Yeah, it didn't work.
Did not work.
Tom Jones let you down again.
Tom Jones again.
Yeah.
Anyway,
You want to go first? Or you want me to go first?
well, this is the point of the podcast called "What's New," which is what we do is we type in CIA or FBI into the Google machine, hit the news tab, and we just read out whatever we see. Now, we used to do this live, and now we do it before the podcast. We just did this because otherwise the same story pops up a bunch of times, and you end up reading the same headline.
Yeah.
Do you want me to go first?
It's all you, man. What are you going to do?
Okay. The first link I found was a secret project to keep the A-12. They had to stop building. The CIA was building a secret airplane or something in what do you call the place, the movie Burbank, and they had to move it to Area 51. And it just says to keep the A-12 project secret, the CIA stored it in boxes and then moved it from Skunk Works to Area 51, Groom Lake in Nevada. So basically, they took this secret airplane, which turned into the SR-71 Blackbird, built by Lockheed. And they put it. They basically had a box slightly bigger than the airplane. Put the whole airplane into a box and drove it to Area 51. And there's photos of it here.
Not conspicuous at all.
This huge box that they put the airplane into, and they're being driven through the country in the middle of the night.
Why does the CIA even exist? Why do the American people allow the CIA to be a thing?
That's cool. Yeah, that's a very good question.
Why doesn't the UN come down on it too? But
that's a good question.
The next headline is: I was a prisoner in Guantanamo Bay, but who is its biggest captive? And I just like this because the first thing says, my journey into the unknown started when I was sold to the CIA as an Egyptian Al-Qaeda general. I was 18 years old and from Yemen. So that's extraordinary rendition, right? Gone wrong.
So is that like a Yelp review of like his stay in Guantanamo Bay or something?
0 out of 10.
Well, he gave it 5 stars. That's interesting. He gave it 5 stars.
Okay.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
Continental graphics and all, right?
Yeah,
5 stars. Right? Go back next week.
Yeah, but this whole article about this guy's being a prisoner in Guantanamo Bay, it's an interesting article if you want to see it. And the third link I have is about, it says, when a Cavendish banana was enough to send U.S. troops to invade nations. This is a whole thing about the banana wars. Now, the banana wars are a whole series of invasions and military operations by the American government in Central and South American countries, generally who are producing bananas. And at no point do the banana wars have anything to do with anything I said in this podcast? So I just thought that was interesting. So this is extra stuff in other countries, like in Panama and all sorts of. I'll be talking about all these things later on. So that also came up, a banana, and it's an interesting article as well. Dominican Republic, Haiti, Honduras, Panama, all these countries, but not Guatemala in particular. That's my CIA What's New bit.
Okay, so for the FBI, the first one is Leonardo DiCaprio and Kim Kardashian grilled for 1MDB secrets, which apparently is the One Malaysia Developmental Berhad scandal.
Okay, and they grilled. So, I wish they'd grill them in real life.
Yeah, really. DiCaprio and Kardashian apparently both got some time with the FBI. Okay. And then we have, I lost it. FBI's warrantless message surveillance is said to drop dramatically. Gee. Huh.
So they're not bugging people without a warrant anymore. They're just getting shady warrants. Is that it?
Yeah, I guess that's what.
Okay, that's much better, isn't it?
Yeah, and this is like the most important news item we have for the FBI. FBI Richmond accepting applications for 2023 Teen Academy. All right, kids. Party!
Oh.
What sort of summer camp do you want to go to? I went to FBI summer camp. Did you?
I mean, to be fair, it's not like FBI summer camp wouldn't be fucking useful.
Or hilarious.
It's probably mostly going to be propaganda. Like, you're not actually going to... Yeah. I doubt you're going to learn very much.
I mean, I didn't go to role-playing summer camp, but I feel like I did.
LARPing? Let's LARP as FBI agents and spend time looking at everybody's browser history. Woo!
My mother sent me to a summer
camp.
As
if those kids aren't, like, they're teenagers. They're already looking at porn all day anyway.
Right. Awesome.
I have no frame of reference, unfortunately, so...
Alrighty, well, I think that's it.
Is that it? We done?
Anything else? Yeah, we're done.
That was Operation PBSuccess.
Don't invite me ever again.
Wow, that's an endorsement.
Okay, yeah.
That's what you end on. Never invite me ever again.
Nostalgic.
I'm just going to make the podcast take 3 times as long to record,
That's
and
fine.
I'm also going to
Okay.
just bring way more nuance to the
I'm going to tell you
table.
right now, Chesh, Seamus is the editor, so whatever happens from now on is his
Oh yeah,
fault.
blame it on me. Yeah, that's it.
Give you a couple nuggets.
Yeah.
All right, well,
All
that's our
right,
show.
we'll see everybody in 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
So,
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
bye.